Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Playeasy Warmup, the podcast where we dive into the stories, people, and places driving the sporting event and tourism industry forward. I'm your host, Kerri Shields. Today's episode is one I'm really excited about because we're highlighting a sport that so many Americans discover every 4 years during the Olympics and instantly become fans of USA Team Handball. Joining us today is Michael King, CEO of USA Team Handball, and he's had quite a journey. He started with competing on the US national team to now leading the organization at a pivotal time for its growth in the country. What I especially appreciate about Michael is the approach he's taking in this new role. He's passionate, innovative, and deeply motivated to grow the sport of handball in the US. You can feel the energy in the way he talks about building the future, creating new opportunities, his passion for storytelling, and thinking differently about really what's possible in the growth of this sport. And so, with the 2028 Summer Olympics on the horizon in Los Angeles, there's never been a more exciting moment for handball in the States. We'll talk about what makes the sport so captivating, the momentum USA Team Handball is building, how they think about finding the right host city partners, creating memorable event experiences, and what success looks like on the road to LA28. If you work in sports, events, destinations, or simply love learning about how emerging sports grow, this is a conversation you're going to enjoy. Let's get into it with Michael King. Today's episode is sponsored by the Playeasy Innovator Summit, happening this summer, June 15th through 17th, 2026, in Ann Arbor, Michigan, at the Vanguard Ann Arbor. The Innovator Summit is Playeasy's annual gathering of destination leaders, event organizers, and industry partners. 3 days of hands-on innovation, real conversations, and practical ideas you can bring back to your community. Ann Arbor is a city that knows sports and knows how to host. Just 20 minutes from the airport, it's easy to get to and get around, with top-tier sports facilities, a walkable downtown, and 400-plus restaurants perfect for connecting outside of sessions. Between meetings, take in the energy of the University of Michigan, explore the Huron River, and be sure to stay for a private tour of the Big House on our final evening together. If you're thinking about innovation, technology, and what's next for hosting, we'd love to see you in Ann Arbor this June. Mike, welcome to the Playeasy Warmup podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, I'm super excited for this conversation, but let's start from the beginning. You've had a really unique journey from playing on the U.S. national team to now leading the organization as CEO. Can you take us through that path?
Yeah, it depends on how far back we want to go. It's been I've been very fortunate over time and all the serendipity along the way. But yeah, I was brought in to the national team training program back when we had a residency program in Auburn, Alabama, coming over from my previous sporting background. And after being there for a couple of years, I had an opportunity to attend Northwestern Law School, and they were paying more than USA Team Handball at the time. So I had that tremendous opportunity, and honestly, was never in my mind. In fact, I had explicitly told people that I was not interested in sitting the chair I'm sitting in now, but had some mentors that sort of chided me on, if you're actually really passionate about something, like it's clearly going to bother you if this doesn't get better. And so ultimately transitioning into a leadership role in September 24, and that was graciously offered to me by the board of directors. And yeah, and here we are. That's the dollar store version.
Yeah. And yeah, it's funny. We co-founded Playeasy about 8 years ago now, and we were former athletes. And it was never on my list of things I wanted to do, becoming a co-founder or a CEO. And I think we were looking to solve a problem that was close to us. And so I know that you can feel exactly that. It would keep you up at night. And so having been both an athlete and now the CEO, how has your perspective of the sport and the organization as a whole and what it needs evolved?
Yeah, I think probably the most surprising thing has been that my background in handball, my playing experience is incidental to the performance in the role. It helps in key pieces, but the heaviest lift has virtually nothing to do with handball, which makes it easier to work with other CEOs of other NGBs, understanding that, a lot of sports federations are facing similar issues. But I'd say probably the biggest thing has been, one, having that athlete experience helps me know when we're drifting from the mission, is that it's very clear when we're not delivering things that are important for handball. Having been in the system, that blares out at you a lot more quickly because you have that experience. And then, so the other piece is that it's really made me more empathetic to the athlete experience stepping out of it, because you don't really know how many of these dozens of invisible systems that there are between funding and logistics, partnerships, corporate sponsorships, building a philanthropic network, working with destinations and venues, youth development, medical support. You could go down the list, and then dealing with the IRS and our taxes. There's all of these invisible systems that, as an athlete, the whole idea is like you block out the noise, you focus on the task at hand, you're training, you're training, you're training. The most frustrating thing is that every bit of distraction is noise. Every question that you don't understand, why are we doing these things this way? Is it helps you understand there's this entire book. You're really only seeing that key first chapter as like the on the court performance at training camp, at a training site. And having that understanding now of, okay, like the athletes have absolutely no idea what's going on over here, but that they have questions on the other side. And so that level of perspective is super helpful of, yeah, if I was still in the position I was in previously as an athlete, I'd be wondering what the heck's going on over there. And so that helps sort of preempt those things and make sure that we stay on mission and communicate well.
Yeah, it's funny. I can relate to that so much. I've said it a few times on here, but I was an active participant in sports tourism for my whole life and had no idea that there were people responsible for bringing these events that I was traveling to life, and the amount of operations, logistics, and just people involved in making that visitor experience and overall athlete experience happen was so mind blowing to me getting in this industry. And so I think you hit the nail on the head. There's just so much that you don't understand, but having the unique perspective from the athlete side is, I think, I'm sure it makes you a lot better at this position.
Yeah, and like I said, I've been very fortunate in my sporting background and taking it from the sports tourism perspective. It's wild to zoom out and realize, because handball's still at a very nascent stage of building out that regularized sort of eventized nature to make it easy to interact for those destinations. But going back, at 8 years old, I was playing in the North American Roller Hockey Championships, and there's 96 teams in Fort Lauderdale. It's like, yeah, people had to make that happen. As it turns out, the 8-year-olds were not in charge.
Yeah,
And so, yeah, when you zoom out and realize that every level of the sport, of every sport, Olympic or not, has that going on. It's a Wild West frontier that some people have
yeah,
gotten very good at managing, and we're trying to plug into that.
totally. And then for those who may not be familiar, how do you explain team handball and the sport of handball to someone in the US seeing it for the first time?
Yeah, I think we've all, from our niche community, settled on, water polo on land or soccer with your hands tend to be the quick, like, quick hitter elevator pitch. But yeah, trying to explain to people that, yeah, it's like basketball movement, but you're throwing the ball instead of shooting, and instead of shooting and dribbling, but also there is dribbling. So we tend to stick to, water polo on land. And then obviously for 60% of the country between the Mississippi and the Rockies, they have no conception of water polo either. So
Yeah.
it's always a fun one that we're still trying to drill down on to. There are elements of it that are like nothing else, like every sport. There's unique elements. And so, yeah, we go with those, to keep it simple and build from there.
And I told you this before we started recording, but I now think my TikTok feed is filled with just watching handball and competitions. And I think it's when people see it, they're instantly hooked and want to see more. What do you think makes the sport so compelling?
I mean, I think the fact that the sort of chaotic movement, physicality, but also the timing and coordination, all of that is rewarded. Is that there's just the level of pace and the mixture of, you know, big bodies slamming into each other, but also these really quick, beat somebody in a phone booth, one-on-one moves. It's and then getting into the artistry of spin shots and finesse shots is that there's, it's a difference between, like, if you take basketball for an example, is that it's like there's more regular physical contact, and a lot of that is basketball is, hard, 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 soft, right? The finish is soft unless you're, throwing down a dunk every once in a while. In handball, it's the opposite. It's hard, 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 hard. Like you finishing
Yeah.
strong through the goalie. And it's actually the one-off, the surprise plays are the opposite of a dunk, which is the spin shots, the float shots that are really, create their own incredible optics. So I think it's just, there's an electricity and, both aerial, vertical, and side to side. That's really the best of everything as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's incredible how athletic some of, I was watching a lot of the professional, the women's and the men's side, and just the quickness of the shot and the finesse. There's so much skill that goes into it. But from an organization level, I know we talked to the USA from the ones that are going to be going to the Olympics, but as an organization, could you give us a breakdown of who is involved within USA Handball and the types of competitions that you oversee within the organization?
Yeah. So we are unique, both in our relatively smaller scale in the movement. We're also unique because we pretty much handle everything. So we have youth programs underneath our sanctioned clubs, building up to the largest share of our domestic play is, amateur adult competition. So we've got, 450, 500 matches across 16 to 20 tournaments a year of adult club competitions spanning coast to coast. For example, at the end of last month, we had a men's tournament going on in Los Angeles, a mixture of men's and college teams going on at West Point in New York, and we had a women's camp going on at the same time. And also, we had a college conference championship going on in Ohio. So we have stuff dotted all over the map at that sort of broad mid level. And then up above that, we operate 13 national teams. So we have three disciplines: indoor, which is the Olympic sport; beach, which competes in the World Games and the World Beach Games, and has its own World Championships; and then wheelchair handball, which we expect to be incorporated into the Para Games starting in 2032. And we are rating world silver medalists at that. And then for beach, the men's and women's teams actually head to St. Kitts in 2 weeks for North American Championships. And then on the indoor side, we have the senior team, U21, which is juniors, U19, which is youth, and U17, which is cadet, which all operate continental championships. And so, for example, they operate in alternate years. So last year was the men's side. So all four of those teams for the men at all age levels went to the world championships last year. So there's plenty to do.
Yeah, I was gonna say, not a whole lot going on, but it seems and it feels like there is a ton of momentum for the sport. And you guys also recently received the IHF President's Development Award. And so, what did that recognition mean to you and the organization?
Well, first they didn't give us any forewarning, and it was towards the end of the IHF
Yeah.
Congress. We're seeing a giant room in Cairo with representatives of 211 member federations. So the first was a pit in my stomach, like
Wow.
there's no speech component. So I tapped Patrick
Oh, yeah.
Gallagher, our chair, on the show. I'm like, you go get it, just in case they hand somebody a microphone. That's not going to be me off the cuff.
Yeah.
So it was a tremendous honor and really great. I think the recognition for how much lift we had accomplished in sort of overhauling ourselves, not just in terms of the immediate competitive benefit, but preparing ourselves to continually scale infrastructure and relationships so that we can sustain forward momentum. It's really tremendous honor. While at the same time, you sit there and you say, well, it's kind of odd when we feel like we're in a 100-step process and we did steps 1 through 5 this year, to be like, all right, here's the highest award that we'll ever give you, other than a team winning a gold medal, and you get that at step 5. But I guess it's sort of like a baby, like you film a baby's first steps. I guess you don't film steps,
Yeah.
300 to 500. So it's it's tremendous honor. It's really more than anything else, a kick in the pants to keep working, because it's nice that someone notices at the highest levels, for sure.
That's incredible. Congratulations. And yeah, you're right. It's an incredible honor, especially I'm sure in a room like that, to be honored in any way, is incredible. And so for those who might not know, because I had to do some research on this, why is there this sudden momentum in the US around the sport of handball?
Yeah, so there's some natural organic nature leading into an Olympics. So sidelining quick into like the history of sports, like from 72 when it first became a full-time Olympic sport. It had been in prior, but it became in every Olympics since 72 to now. And so we had at least the men's or women's team or both qualify every single Olympics from 72 to 96. And then we haven't been back since. So the fact that we have a home bid to the 28 games, and we will undoubtedly be in the
Yeah.
Olympics for the first time in 32 years, is there's a natural momentum there. But obviously, then adding to that by saying, all right, how are we using that as not an endpoint, but how's our staff, how is our central leadership, how are we putting this into something that, one, builds towards it, so that because we can just show up, like we can show up
Yeah.
and every tournament has one team that gets last, and we just go there and do that. And so, but the idea of like, how are we meaningfully preparing to put our best foot forward, but then also doing that in a way where this is a jumping off point, not an end point. And so a lot of that huge, blow up in terms of some viral moments owes to, frankly, directly to our national team staffs that have been onboarded across these programs over the last year and a half, is that they've really, um, you know, taken the oars and driven on each of their respective programs of saying we need more athletes, but we also want to give those athletes visibility and opportunity. And so they have been, scouring every opportunity to push the sport out there and introduce people, to the point where we had 110 women sign up for our most recent Florida identification camp. And obviously, we want the best of athletes. We also want our outreach to fans, and so they're doing everything they possibly can to expand the tentacles of what handball can be. And I'm super proud of that and thankful that we have the right people.
Yeah, definitely. And I told you, my TikTok feed is now, I went done a deep dive of just some of the opportunities for these female athletes. And I know me myself, I was looking at, as a former athlete who hasn't competed at a high level in a long in a long time, these fellow women who might have played rugby, might have played volleyball, might have played lacrosse, who were communicated to that there is an opportunity to potentially be on an Olympic squad. And so they were traveling across the country to these open sessions to be able to try out for the team. And I thought it was such a cool way of storytelling, but also a great way of just getting the name out there of the sport and the momentum building up to that LA28. And so I know you said it's a credit to your team, but what other maybe driving forces do you think contribute to the growth of the sport?
I mean, you always have to. It's not so much a shameless plug as it is like genuinely our title sponsorship with Verizon has been tremendous, for us. They've been a partner, since 2019 and have been steady through. COVID was difficult for everybody in terms of continuing to push things forward, but patient all the way through to the point where now, when we're actualizing a plan, they're still here and they're still driving behind us. And so it's, like I said, there's all the stuff that happens in front of the scenes, but behind the scenes, that's been an irreplaceable level of support in terms of what they've made possible on the front end. As far as, they were the stability through and through for us to then have a driving off point to create leverage into this. But then, yeah, the other piece is, you know, you can go out and say, all right, we're going to go find some athletes. And so this is my own background. I didn't touch a handball till I was 27 years old and had tremendous opportunities in the sport because you've been training for parts of it your whole life without realizing it, for, all the multi-sport athletes that we have in this country, yourself, myself, and otherwise. But they still have to learn handball. They still are making up a 20-year deficit of all these people that have been playing handball in Germany and France and everything else since they could walk. And so putting together a training site program in partnership with Treasure Coast, Florida, Play Treasure Coast, their tourism bureau, Indian River State College, and with support of the Port Lucie County Public Schools. Sorry, it's Port St. Lucie, but it's St. Lucie County Public Schools. But they've been really, really tremendous in giving us a place of saying, okay, once we've identified you, now we've got a 2-year run up to put you in a crash course. Where are we simulating a truly professionalized environment? Because the reality is there's, dozens of professional leagues in Europe where the best of the best that we're going to be playing against the Olympics they're not waiting to be caught from behind. They're still training and playing at a high level every day. And so that's probably been the most critical piece is we can't seriously go out and tell people you should give this a try unless we give them a real opportunity to have a pathway.
Yes, and I'm sure that this is not something new that you're hearing, but I have the opportunity to interview and have exposure to a lot of different types of sports, and seeing just through social media and the content that you've pushed out around the storytelling of s really starting from the beginning, like how to play a sport, what kind of ball do you use, how many people are on the court. It was so informative into wanting me to learn more, and then I will now be a fan as you
Mhm.
continue to that LA28. And so just continuing down that storytelling path. And as you said, you're really starting from the ground up and building a sport in terms of, usually at this age, I would think that I'm done ever being able to play competitively. But if people think they
Yeah.
have the opportunity to be 27 years old and pick up the ball for the first time and compete at that level, I just think it's incredible,
Yeah.
what you guys are doing.
No, we let
And
former be a choice. When you say former athlete, that can be your choice, And so,
yeah,
yeah, and to your point about the, diving in the storytelling, is that it's also really exciting on the upshot of this is as we continue to build, the story for these athletes, the ones that make the team and the ones that don't, they're all part of Team USA as far as building towards this. It's also funny too, like looking at all the 30 for 30 and various documentaries are out there where they've caught up in all these other sports to the point where it's like, yeah, I was alive for that. Like I don't need to watch a documentary there. And so this idea that there's this entire, not just being introduced to this incredible sport, but there's this entire catalog of the last 100 years of this sport's history that nobody has been exposed to for people to dig in and really find out what this has meant to not just the US's own stories of its Olympic history, but
Yeah.
then say, yeah, there's been serious professional levels with Champions League competitions for, decades in Europe. And so there's a really cool opportunity to open up a whole new world of sporting stories that are pretty incredible. So I'm excited. I'm excited as we continue to build forward and build fandom, is that there's a bottomless well of awesome handball stuff
Yeah.
that America hasn't been exposed to yet, including the story that we're writing right now.
Totally. And I am excited to follow, and I know my team as well. And so you mentioned a few partners that you have worked with and the amount of events that you have across the country. What in your mind do you look for in a host city or a destination or venue when you're looking to host your events?
Yeah, I mean, the first one always stumbling block is that because of the way the game's presented on video, because it's zoomed out and it's taken sort of the same vantage as basketball, the court is so much larger than a basketball court. It's 40 meters by 20, so it's basically a full 40, 50 feet longer, and it's basically the court space is basically as wide as a handball court is long when you get into benches and things like that. So the number one thing we always have to work with is, hey, we're usually, especially when we're running club tournaments, we usually need a couple courts. And so that's limiting. So we always start with trying to make sure that we're upfront with the venue, because some of the assumptions, well, the other piece is that sometimes when you say handball, they're like, we don't have racquetball courts here. That's like,
Yeah.
that's okay. It happens frequently. So that's
Yeah.
that's the number one. It's just trying to make sure that we're communicating and building the vision of what we're talking about in our needs. But then beyond that, our community travels incredibly well. They are yeah, it's a very committed niche group of a couple thousand people that turn out, and we run great events. And so the main thing for us is, hey, how can we leave behind a legacy? Because our group will pick up and go anywhere. We've been, nationals in Spokane, Washington, in Adrian, Michigan, in Myrtle Beach, in Dallas, in, I forget where the city in Pennsylvania. I apologize. It was 12 years ago, but,
Yeah.
we want to be able to leave a legacy behind that, because the nice thing is like, you basically just need some lines and goals and a ball. Like that's one of the benefits. And so we can pick up and put down anywhere. And our real focus is, hey, how do we make this a feature of a community? How do we do youth camps around that? What are the ways that we can engage the community, pull people out and say, you've never seen this before. And we're going to, because no matter what city we say, 99% of the people in that city have never seen a handball match before. So whether it's a 12 million person city or 12,000 person city, there's something unique that we're bringing to the community. And so between the ability to do some youth grassroots programming, education, and then making sure that we get the word out, we're really looking for a partner that really wants to create this as a cool feature for their community moving forward. We want to leave something behind. That's it. That's our main priority.
Yeah, that it's such a common theme across specifically the growing sports across the sports tourism industry is the need for a buy-in within the community, because you can't just plop a new sport in a community that and be let alone, but you really are looking for an extension of your team to help grow that sport and that event. And so how important is it that a host city actually embraces the sport, not just hosts the event, but really gets behind it?
For our priorities, it's tremendously important. For in terms of practical application, we can sort of pick up and put down under the cover of night. We don't, we are very self sufficient in that way. So, in the sense of, can the event be a success without that sport? Yeah, technically, we've done that plenty of times. Our goal, though, in terms of the importance of where we want to go and the impact we feel like we can make, and being a unique feature for venues and for things, is that this is something really cool to offer. And the feedback with youth programs and parents is like, this is amazing. I want my kid to play this. Where can they play in college? It's like, I'm working on it. But um, yeah, that aspect is tremendously critical for moving forward, because we just feel like any time that our people show up in mass, there's a tremendous opportunity to make a lasting effect on where we are.
Totally. And you mentioned just the sizing of the court and the need for balls. What else would a venue or a host city need in order to host one of your events?
I mean, everybody loves proximal hotel arrangements and things like that. But we're really, as I said, because because the needs of court setup are pretty, like, obviously we need to make sure there's not like glass right behind the edge of the court because the
Yeah.
balls are flying 80 miles an hour. So a wall or a backup net is always good for collateral damage. But generally speaking, like,
Yeah.
we're looking for a 20 by 40 rectangle, a couple of them, and looking for, the same sorts of traits everybody else look for in terms of what's nearby so that people have a great experience. And the more that we can be in the heart of a city or a town or a county so that there's a real experience where like our people are building a relationship with the city. Those are always great, but it allows us, because of that lack of really unique need, other than the sizing dimensions,
Yeah.
to basically what can we make out of this? I like approaching it as a bespoke thing and figuring out, hey, what can we build into the schedule here? What can we build into the relationship where this is unique for us and unique for the destination?
Yeah. And one of those unique partnerships that you have and are great partners of ours are with Auburn and the Auburn
Yeah.
Opelika community, especially around wheelchair handball. How did that come together and what made that destination the right fit?
Yeah, I mean, we have forever ties to Auburn. So our '84 Olympian Rita Clanton was already working there. So that actually was the seed of our
Okay.
national team training site that we had for indoor from 2013 to 2018. And a couple of our national team players actually finished PhDs at Auburn at the time. One of them, Ford Dyke, is now our head wheelchair handball coach. And so
Okay.
that relationship matured pretty acutely because his relationships down there and because of our history in the Auburn area, and they have jumped in with both feet. And it's been incredible, the support for training camps, for our send off, and then it's always nice for a partner where you get to show immediate impact. Where basically within a year of that partnership, we finished silver at the World Championships
Wow.
and continue to build that down there. I think we have actually at the end of this month. It's the next time down there. The wheelchair program is very active down there. Training camps 3 to 4 times a year, and and they're prepping for a follow up to that 2024 silver medal at World Championships this fall. So and AO tourism is right there in the middle of it.
Yeah. I mean, I can't speak highly enough about that team, but
Yeah,
it's clear with multiple organizations that we've talked to about working with that team is just the investment and buy-in of a true partnership. And they're always open to exactly what you said is figuring out, how do we make this the best athlete and event experience possible. So always love to hear good testimonials for great cities. And so, for destinations listening right now who might want to host a handball event, what is your advice on how to approach that conversation?
I'm easy to find, and
Okay.
ultimately between our spate of it's because we have so many national teams, we always have something at the international level that can be bid on between, whether it's the U17 Women's North American Championship or the beach handball senior men's and women's North American Championship, or even if they wanted to go higher scale, a U17 Men's World Championship, things like that, where we've got, so we played 22 international competitions last year between our team, and we, some of them were world level, but we had the ability to bid on 11 of them if we felt like it. And so that's always a cool opportunity to say, hey, if you guys want to go big, we don't publish a lot of RFPs for those up front because it's a constant churn. That opportunity is always out there, depending on how far a group wants to go, a destination wants to go, and how far they want to plan ahead. Um, but then on the other side of it, we'll be publishing shortly our RFPs for our college national championships that we run annually, as well as our club
Okay.
national championships, which this year we're doing in cooperation with Quad Cities, which that's actually an example of that bespoke partnership where we say, hey, we were going to do our club championships from May 14th to the 17th, but we had the ability to stack on top of that the men's world championship qualifier. So our men's team, the one that'll be at the Olympics, is playing in Quad Cities from the 11th to the 17th, and that'll overlap with our club championships at the same venue. So it's going to be really, really cool to basically turn, Quad Cities, Iowa into the epicenter of handball in the Western Hemisphere for
Yeah.
7 days. And so, yeah, that's a big piece. We're also, currently working with the National Collegiate Inline Roller Hockey Association and USA Dodgeball on
Oh,
building out some joint RFPs for, some of those venues and destinations that are looking for a little bit more scale. And so,
okay.
partnering with groups like that can make it more amenable for destinations that, need a higher head count than that are generally doing the same thing over and over again with AAU and volleyball and basketball and things like that, because that's where the numbers are. That's another piece that we're bringing to the fore over the next month or so. But our website will have on our events page down at the bottom, we'll have those RFPs up by the end of the month for future events. Just because our college national championships are in 2 weeks,
Yeah.
and then open nationals with that bigger event in 5 weeks. So that next cycle and planning further out are going up here shortly. But like I said, my phone number and email are never hard to find.
Hey, I love the innovation and creativity that you're bringing to this role. It's clear that you are doing everything in your power to help grow the sport, not just within the sport, but other opportunities within partnerships. It's always cool to hear in this space. And when it comes to the event and visitor experience, how do you think about the experience you're creating, not just for the athletes competing, but for people traveling with them, the fans, family, and local communities showing up?
Yeah, that's been a big piece that we've really tried to focus on. What we're going to be looking forward to with our venue destination partnerships is that when we bring people in, because these are our largest events are amateur events in terms of the club side. A lot of times for cost, efficiency, these guys are coming in and girls are coming in and playing. They'll come in Thursday night or at least for nationals, maybe come in Wednesday night. They're going to play 5 matches in 72 hours. So they're running on to the next thing. And so there's not always the most consideration for what's everybody else doing while you're like icing up
Yeah.
for the next game in 7 hours. Like, what is your family going to do the whole time, and what's in the area, what's the price point, how can we, team room blocks versus people bringing families. And so yeah, that's a big piece. And so for example, with Quad Cities, that's something that we've taken in, is that a next door is a iron tee, golf range for husbands and sons and daughters and things like that, and then have a bowling alley and an arcade in the facility. And so little pieces like that where we know that the whole family can have a great experience is definitely something that we're focusing on more often. And obviously, destinations where there's things that are available, broadening the radius and figuring out how we market the things that are offsite so that people can make time. And that's something we're trying to do as well, is that the better that we can do in terms of the joint financial arrangement in our destination partnership, the more we can space out these schedule, and the more visible and active we can make because at the end of the day, we got to get the games in. And so the
Yes.
more that we can do to spread the footprint of the event, which is ultimately a tolerance for cost and use of vacation days for a lot of our folks. And so the more that we can do there, the more we'll be able to generate access to the rest of what community surrounds us.
Totally. And that's something we talk about a lot on this podcast. I was a former athlete and I used to play AAU, and having 5 games in 72 hours was just funny to think back on how we did that. But what we really remember are just the times in between games that we got to spend with our teammates in these different cities. And same with, being a sibling of athletes, like being able to travel with my sisters or brother and going into those local communities is really what we take away from those events. So when you're thinking forward to LA28, how are you thinking about the runway to the 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles? And what role do host cities and partners play in that buildup?
I mean, a tremendous part of it, right? Because ultimately, sports are played in the real world. We're not, unfortunately,
Yeah.
this isn't e-handball. And so everything that we do, every step that Team USA takes, or our broader community around that support, it's happening in real physical space, and that has to be somewhere. And so the ability for us to set that, whether it is the club system that surrounds it or the active training environments or competition environments, it's tremendously important as we build towards LA. And obviously, a lot is jamming into the LA area, which we don't mind being there either. But frankly, there's the entire country that we know i- is waiting to be exposed to handball. So
Yeah.
that's but for us, building a coherent map of saying, hey, we've got all these different streams between athlete identification and development, both domestically and abroad. We have a burgeoning club and burgeoning youth system, building more and more into the college level. It's like we have all these different things going on, and the reality is, hey, where can we become strong partners and repeat players, because they're invaluable for us. And frankly, we're learning that it's tremendously beneficial for us to go and then go back again, both for them and for us, in terms of we're doing 17 new things every 3 weeks. And so the idea that we're not reinventing the wheel with the things that we already know how to do well makes for tremendous partnerships.
Yeah, it's such a common theme of the conversations that we have is just the investment into those partnerships, because there's also so much to learn and so much trust that goes into having new events like yours, and just the ability to be creative and innovative within the space as you're continuing to grow the sport. I just, from an outside looking in, is just tremendously important on both sides for that. And so When you think about the next 5 to 10 years, I know crazy that LA is 28 is even before that,
Yeah.
but what excites you most about the future of handball in the US?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that we have something really unique here, in terms of we've already spoken on like the optics of the sport, which obviously biased, but from unbiased sources, this is a uniquely electric sport and opportunity. But within that, um, handball, what the community is both here in the growing group that we have and what it is internationally, it's a really awesome group of people, and I think the way that the sport is played, the lessons that it teaches, what it demands of you, lend a lot to that. Is I think that we're introducing something to the United States that isn't exactly like anything else. I mean, the simplest way is like, given the speed of the game and the physicality, that this isn't picking on basketball because I've got, I spent my entire childhood being Jordan posters all over my wall, but like in
Yeah.
basketball, you can always stop the game on your time. The best player is always in control. They can take the game to their spot with the ball, set up their play. With 17 seconds left, Elena Deladon, she can walk to wherever on the court she wants to make the play, and it's just going to happen that way. You don't have that luxury in handball. The game happens on time. You're, trying to play all six defenders engaged at once, plus the goalie standing behind them. Is that if you want to play 1-on-1, you're playing 1-on-7. And so the amount of
Yeah.
timing and the interdependent reliance, but that combines with still that peak of individual skill and athleticism that's necessary, is super, super unique. And I think that there's something really cool about that introducing this sport to this country with the sporting background that we have and the level of athlete that we have, is that we haven't even scratched the surface of how electrifying the optics of this sport can be, because we haven't even gotten good at it yet. And when we get good at stuff, again, biased, we do it the best when we really want. So,
Yeah. And I think you just answered my next question also. Elena's an old teammate of mine, so I love that you just called her name out. She would be happy to hear that. But you said how electric the game is. But is there anything else that you wish more Americans knew about the sport?
I wish they knew the whole world of the sport that's out there. We're really working on the visibility of these professional women's and men's leagues in Europe, where we're talking about this is a multi-billion-dollar industry in Europe. There are incredibly high-level athletes that are every bit, the same level of guys that you're seeing in the NBA and things like that, and women in the WNBA that are already incredibly good at this sport. I would like them, one,
Yeah.
to be able to take in what the class of the sport looks like, because it's really pretty incredible, as your TikTok will tell you. But then, on top of that, for them to have a real sense of what we're chasing, because who everyone else is and their incredible level is as much a part of the story as everything that we're doing and our athletes are doing to catch them from, behind, so to say, in terms of building up our program. So I think that's a big piece for us, is to work with these international leagues and make available what's the current pinnacle of the sport. Because, like, as I also mentioned, the stories and the history, handball has, the whole world has been moving on without us. They've been
Yeah.
having incredible stories, incredible finishes, and so there's this whole encyclopedic depth of everything over here in the history of this sport that's really, really cool. And so that building up that level of exposure and building portals in for people to be able to easily go in and say, hey, but Paris Saint-Germain's handball team is not playing on ESPN, but when they play Barcelona in the Champions League, this is as high a level of the sport happening anywhere in the world. This is, a bunch of 2-meter guys smashing into each other and throwing a ball 85 miles an hour. When the when you have Gyuri from Hungary on the women's side, going for the Champions League on the women's side, this is unlike any other women's sport that you've seen in the United States, because there just isn't the combination of throwing and pace in the sports that we currently play. And so that's something that's really exciting for me, is that it's like, you guys just haven't gotten to see it yet, but it's unbelievable. And when, we hope that there's a contribution by the US, stepping up its competitiveness, that only pushes the entire level higher.
That's awesome. I love it, and I love the excitement and momentum that you have behind you, and I think you've been very humble just in terms of your athletic past. Not only were you a handball player, but also an ice hockey and lacrosse player. What do you think you learned most from your playing days that have made you successful in this role?
In this role, I mean, I think the it's the everyday nature. I mean, every athlete picks up on that, is that they, whether or not they realize it right away, a lot of us, realize it later on, like, oh yeah, like I was working really, really hard when I was 9. It just didn't feel like work. And so it's that, like, when you plug back in and realizing that, like, being at your best and making it is, like, you don't run a mile at a time. You run 100 feet, 350 consecutive days, or, 520 consecutive days. Like,
Yeah.
that's how you actually get there. And so that grinding nature, which has always been, some level of who what I put in as an athlete, is sort of irreplaceable, because we're trying to, like I said, the sport's been, they got a 54-year head start in terms of Olympic development on us. And so the scale of what this is, and building a competitive sport in, in the US economy, let alone on the court, you're devouring a whale. And so the athlete thing is, it's always one bite at a time as an athlete, right? It's the game winning shot happened, 3 years ago in the gym when you were there 2 in the morning getting shots up. It didn't just happen. And so that's the piece I think that's the most important at all times, is you just got to keep your feet moving.
I couldn't agree more. And Mike, this was such a pleasure getting to know you more about the sport of handball and just all of the excitement around what's going to be an incredible few years for the sport. And so I know you said your number and email are pretty readily available, but if someone is interested in learning more, whether
Yeah.
it be hosting your event or getting more involved in the sport, how should they do so?
Yeah. So Michael.King at usateamhandball.org is me if you need the CEO's attention. And then other general inquiries can go to our general staff, which is office, OFFICE, at handballusa.org. And then that www.usateamhandball.org is our website, where we have our list of national team and currently planned sanction events, as well as rules of the game, and avenues to get to our socials, and things like that. See who's in the current player pool, and all the different news and developments like that. So those are, and then our Instagram channel at USA Team Handball, all the typical stuff where all the youngs will actually find us, I suppose. So yeah, we're on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, X. Maybe we're on Tumblr. I'll have to check with my team on that. But
uh, awesome. Well, Mike, it was great to get to know you. And yeah, just excited to keep following. So appreciate your time.
oh, likewise, thank you so much for having me and for the thoughtful questions. I'll interview you next time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Of course. Thanks, everyone. Until next time. See you later. Bye.